Welcome back to the Live Desk at the George W. Bush Presidential Center's Forum on Leadership. I'm your host, Kevin Sullivan. We spent the last couple of hours tuning into panels on education reform with Priscilla Chan, on nationalism and global markets with Hank Paulson, Ben Bernanke, and Ed Lazear. If you missed them, we'll post the video momentarily at bushcenter.org. I had a conversation earlier today with Secretary Paulson. Let's go to that interview now. Now we're privileged to welcome to the Live Desk Secretary Hank Paulson, former Secretary of the Treasury, of course. Thank you so much for joining us today,
Sully,
Secretary Paulson.
it's terrific to be here.
Tell us, first of all, about your work at the Paulson Institute.
Well, when I left the Bush administration, I wanted to do what most people do, make a difference, do something that played to my skill set and my interests. I felt that the U.S.-China relationship, a bilateral relationship, is going to be the most consequential one of this century. So I set up a institute that was focused on sustainable economic development and growth and environmental protection in both the U.S. and in China. I call it a think and do tank because we have some programs largely focused on climate change, energy efficiency, some conservation programs advising the Chinese government on their national park system and wetlands conservation. In terms of the economic side, we're strong advocates for Chinese investment in the U.S. to create jobs here. And we have a think tank that's focused on the most, I think, the most important and fundamental policy issues, economic issues in China. Everything from pension reform, tax reform, reforming state-owned enterprises.
And how are the Chinese responding to your outreach in these areas?
Very, very favorably. Part of the reason that I decided to work there is I've known a good number of the top leaders for a long time, including General Party Secretary Xi Jinping. When President Bush asked me to set up the Strategic Economic Dialogue, I stopped first at Hangzhou and actually met with Xi Jinping before he was anointed as a vice president, before going on and meeting with the president and the premier in Beijing at the time.
Now, you have long been interested in conservation, your family going way back. But why does the green finance matter so much? What's the key there?
Well, green finance is all about saving our planet. It's going to take trillions of dollars to clean up the environmental mess we have and to move to a lower carbon economy. And governments don't have the money, so it's going to take the private sector. I'll use China as an example. They're spending $600 billion to $1 trillion every year for the next 5 years to clean up their environment. The government can provide about 10% of that. So green finance is how do the governments put the programs in place, the policies in place to attract the private capital. And so my institute, and I started working with the Chinese government when they became president of the G20. This was a body that President Bush set up, and we advised them on their green finance working group. And so we've been working closely with them on that, on rolling out their cap and trade system, which will be the largest carbon market in the world. So again, it's very important. And the reason it's so important in China is they're the biggest emitter of carbon, and they're a model for the rest of the developing world. And so again, a very interesting and I think important work.
Now, you have a fascinating background from your time as an Eagle Scout, football player at Dartmouth, President or CEO of Goldman Sachs, Secretary of the Treasury. What leadership attributes have you seen that translate across the board to all sectors?
Well, it's interesting because I've worked with some great leaders like President Bush. I've worked with some that weren't as great leaders. I've worked with some good CEOs in business, and they have different skill sets. They can still be great leaders with different skill sets, but the great ones all have certain things in common. The first thing I would say is they need to surround themselves with terrific people, people that complement their strengths and compensate for their weaknesses. And I think that's very important. The next thing is they're accountable. They run to problems, they don't run away. They identify the problems and they take responsibility and work to solve them. Thirdly, they think outside of the box. I say define the job expansively. They do whatever it takes, break glass, do whatever it takes. Don't take no for an answer if there's something that's really, really important. The next thing is they really show they care about people. You know, President Bush just exuded that, and people will go to great lengths for you if you know the boss cares about you. The last thing is they set a standard in terms of integrity. I'm not just talking about obey the law, but this is about doing the right thing. I don't find it very interesting when people say, why do bad people do bad things? That's why you have jails. Why do good people do good things? That's not very interesting. Why do good people do bad things? That's very, very interesting. And they do it because there's a groupthink environment, and the leader has got to set the environment where if something doesn't feel right, people aren't afraid to bring it up. They're encouraged to bring it up and ask questions.
What you just described was principled leadership
Right.
in so many ways, and of course that was the hallmark of our experience with President Bush. Now, harkening back to the financial crisis of 2008, where your leadership was so important and so effective, you had a situation there where you had people with conflicting points of view to your own, and yet you got them to hear you. How did you do that?
Well, it started with President Bush because, unfortunately, I had a year in Washington to build a close working relationship of trust with President Bush before the financial crisis. Otherwise, nothing would have worked, number one. And number two, he encouraged me. He asked me from day one to build relationships on both sides of the aisle. And my experience at Goldman Sachs was that at the same time I was a CEO and running a big organization, I was working with clients. So I knew how to work with principals, how to give advice, not just how to give orders. I knew how to listen. And, I knew that the relationship with President Bush would only work if I had built a relationship of trust with him. Mm-hmm. So that's how I treated members of Congress. And the president put me in a position where I had good opportunity to work with Democrats and Republicans a year before the financial crisis hit. So I've been able to work with the Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and Barney Frank, it's just like the Republicans like John Boehner and Mitch McConnell on things like free trade agreements, on the stimulus plan. So again, it starts at the top, and I have very little respect for anybody that says it's my way or the highway. Right. The only way you get things done is by compromise and doing it on a bipartisan basis.
Well, you laid the groundwork in advance to make that happen. It's a privilege to be back with you again, Secretary Paulson. Thanks so much for spending a few minutes here at the live desk.
Thank you.
That was former Secretary of the Treasury, Hank Paulson. He participated on a panel earlier today about nationalism and global markets with Ben Bernanke, Ed Lazear, and Terry Duffy. If you missed it, check it out at bushcenter.org. Stay tuned now for Studio 43. Today's theme is Transformations in Foundations, New Perspectives for Changing Times. We'll kick it off at 5 with a panel on conservation with Mrs. Laura Bush, who of course is deeply passionate about conservation. And then we'll have the Bush Center's landscape architect, Michael Van Valkenburg, with us, along with interior designer James Farmer and SMU economics professor Klaus Desmond, to discuss why conservation matters in our cities and our own backyards. Don't forget, follow the conversation on social media and join the conversation by sharing photos with hashtag MyChargeToKeep on both Twitter and Instagram. See you back here live at 8:50 tomorrow morning. Enjoy the show. Here with us now from Perry, Georgia, is author and interior designer James Farmer. James will be joining us live on our conservation panel today at 5 p.m. Central. He's also editor-at-large for Southern Living. This is going to be fun. This is one of the more interesting guys you're going to run into. Thanks for stopping by the live desk, James. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So tell us, first of all, about your business.
Well, I'm an interior designer, so I have a great staff and team that works with me, and we're a full-service design firm. We help you whether you're building your home or furnishing your living room. To me, interior design is a service opportunity where we're able to provide you with a lifestyle in a home, creating a house into a home, making it comfortable and stylish.
Now, your business is thriving. How did you find time to write 8 books along the way?
Well, I'm passionate about what I do. I love design. I think design and I think food and gardening and style are all related. And writing to me is an outlet. So whether it's social media or blogs, and the next thing you know, magazine articles, it led to some book ideas that I'd really carried since college. And so the time is, you make the time for what you want to do, and I wanted to write books.
And from a leadership standpoint, you're running a business. So what is your, since it is the Forum on Leadership, what's your leadership philosophy?
Well, my belief and philosophy on leadership is a true leader is first off a servant, and how that servant best serves his or her team, their staff. So I don't like to micromanage, but what I like to do is manage on a micro level. What does my team need individually?
Right.
Corporately as a whole, we are a machine, but this person and this person all have different needs and different personalities, and what I need to do to accomplish that is really how I like to serve, and by serving, that's how I want to lead.
So you're big on the concept of garden living.
Yes.
You're an interior designer, but you talk about food and the outdoors and everything else. So explain that concept to us.
Well, garden living to me, from the interior design standpoint, but let alone from life, is really how I like to live. In interiors, you think about, there's flowers in fabric or there's flowers on the table. But for me, how a garden really influences our life each and every day is simple. It could be a tomato that you've grown yourself and you've made a tomato sandwich, and that's your life. Your life has been enriched and sustained by what you've grown. It could be the flowers on the table. My grandmother really summed it up best when she said we eat with our eyes first. And so you bring the garden inside, and living with that garden, a sprig of mint in your tea, sandwich or vegetables, whatever it is, that's garden living, where each and every day is enriched by the land.
And what's in your garden at home? What do you like to plant?
So I really am a lazy gardener. I like to plant what works. So rather than having something that has to be pruned all the time or needs lots of care, I stick with great Southern basics. I love boxwoods simply because they don't need to be shaped all the time. I love crepe myrtles as great trees, but I plant a lot of flowers to cut. I love to set a beautiful table. And so right now I just planted all my zinnias and cosmos and amaranthus and lots of hydrangeas. They're my favorite.
So some good free advice for our live stream audience today. People normally have to pay big bucks for this for this kind of stuff. So tell us about your relationship with the Bush family. Jenna Hager Bush wrote the foreword to one of your books.
Yes. So Jenna Bush Hager is a dear friend of mine. We've been assigned some story assignments and became friends. And Barbara and I have become friends as well through other friends. And I asked Jenna, I said, I'd love for you to write the foreword for my cookbook. And she hem-hawed about it. And I said, Jenna, you have a great perspective. I grew up in a White House, and my mother and grandmother cooked and taught me how to entertain. You grew up in the White House with your mother and grandmother cooking and entertaining, and a whole different level, but I wanted that perspective because when it comes down to it, it's the food, it's the table, it's that faith and fellowship and family that brings us to the table, and the Bushes represent that, and I just love them for it.
Now you're about to head in for your panel on conservation with Mrs. Bush.
Yes.
Give us a sneak peek of that, a little bit of a preview of what we can expect.
So what I love to do is to educate while entertaining people. So as soon as you sometimes say the word educate, immediately we want to put the snooze on and not think about it. But if you can entertain someone while they're being educated, so it has to be something they're passionate about. And for me, flowers and gardening is something I am very passionate about simply because the conservation part of it all is very important. When you know your zone, when you know your plants, when you know how to plant them, how to take care of them, the work's done for you. Like I mentioned, I'm a lazy gardener. So when you plant things that work, the work's done, and then everyone says, God, Sully, your yard looks great. Well, you let the plants do the work for you. So it's knowing that is that first bit of knowledge, entertainment, that's a key point of conservation.
Now, where are we in the country right now in conservation? Have we made enough progress? Where do we stand?
I think we could always make progress. I don't think we will ever be fully there. I think what we'll be is always turning a corner, and that's exciting. Knowing what to plant, knowing things that don't require too much water if you're in a water restrictive area, knowing what plants provide, resting places for, whether it's the monarch butterfly or other endangered species who are traveling. That's really amazing, but it's getting it out there. A lot of people think I have to wait till I retire to start gardening. No, I started when I could walk. You can too.
Give us a sneak peek of you have the next book in the pipeline, or what can we look forward to?
I'm really looking forward to another book. I don't know exactly what it'll be yet. I'll have to ask Jenna if she wants to help me write it. But what I would love to do is write another book, just celebrating the lifestyle how the garden and how design influence our lives, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, and you told an interesting story of being turned down by several publishers when you first got started. Loyalty is important to you.
Loyalty is very important to me, and I believe in going to the dance with who asked you. And I had a great publisher, Gibb Smith, who took a chance with me, and I've proved it to them that I can write a book, I can sell it, but also I can have an audience who is, pun intended, hungry to learn about food and gardening.
And when those publishers that turned you down initially when you were really a young guy getting started, once you sold a bunch of books, they wanted to.
They did come back, and I just had to tell them that kind of Southern expression. I said, y'all, I'm going to the dance with who asked me, and I don't think they got it completely. They were all from New York, but I think maybe what I could do is just enlighten them on the fact that someone had faith in me, and I had faith in them, and I want to continue that loyalty.
Well, thank you for the time, James.
It's I appreciate it.
At James T. Farmer on Instagram. He's
Absolutely.
a great follow, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Now we have Holly Kuzmich, Executive Director of the Bush Institute. Holly, interesting career, a great asset to us here at the Bush Institute. Worked on Capitol Hill, worked at the White House in domestic policy for President Bush. Has done consulting and now, in addition to being a Senior Vice President of the Bush Center, is the Executive Director of the Bush Institute and does a great job leading that enterprise. Holly, thank you for your time today. Now, big doings here at the Forum on Leadership, and we're unveiling our Leadership in Action report. Why don't you talk?
Right.
Let's start by talking about the leadership work that's done here and the results that we've gotten.
Well, so when the Bush Institute started, almost 8 years ago now, one of the first programs that was put in place was the Women's Initiative Fellowship. And this was a program that came out of our Women's Initiative to train women in the Middle East to develop their leadership skills. Since that time, we've now added 2 more leadership programs to that roster, one for young leaders in Burma that came out of our work on human freedom and democracy, and then our Presidential Leadership Scholars Program. And I think the thing we noticed, the more programs we created and the more we really looked at how we structured them, the curriculum we used, the unique assets within the programs, we realized that, number one, we were having an effect, and number two, we do have something unique to bring to bear when we look at all of the other leadership programs that are out there. And so that was obviously something we wanted to make sure happened here, and that's what led to this report, which outlines the first several years of our results of these programs.
Yeah, the results are really pretty astounding, and especially when you compare them to the private sector programs like this. I mean, we really are able to have enormous influence because we're at a presidential center.
We think so, and that's what our results show. We went out and surveyed the over 300 graduates of the programs that we've had to date and asked them, how likely are you to strongly recommend this program to a friend or colleague? It's what results in something called the Net Promoter Score. And we received a score of 89. It's a scale from negative 100 all the way up to 100. Most people are thrilled to get anything above 50. And so to get 89 is something pretty extraordinary, because it's not only how much do you recommend it, it's how much do you strongly recommend it. And so this is something that our graduates feel like has really transformed their work and their lives.
And we hear that from the participants, that their lives are changing. Mm-hmm. Is there a brand of leadership that is developed at the Bush Center?
Well, I think that the brand of leadership that we develop is really about values and principles. Mm-hmm. And that's true whether we're training young leaders in Burma, where we have more of a focus on freedom and free markets. That's not necessarily what we do in Presidential Leadership Scholars, but there is a common theme, and it's all about understanding your values, your motivation as a leader, bringing that into your work every day, thinking about how you communicate your vision, how you influence and persuade others, what kind of partnerships you build. That, no matter what kind of program we run, is woven into all of it, and that is sort of what we call our special sauce here at the Bush Institute.
And finally, you worked for President Bush both in the administration and obviously here at the Bush Center. How has he influenced your own personal leadership style?
Well, he's an easy guy to work for because what we teach in our leadership programs is the way that he leads all of us, which is he's very clear on what his principles are. That was true when he was president. It's true in the work that we do here at the Bush Institute. And so when he says, here's what I care about, we know what we're going and executing against. And so that was true when he was president and when I worked on education policy for him in the White House. And it's true here now, and it's why we build in principles-based leadership into the work we do.
Well, congratulations, Holly, on all the success you're having in developing leaders. And for more, go to bushcenter.org/leadership in action. You can find the report there. Lots of good stuff in here. Thanks a lot, Holly Kuzmich.
Thank you.
Now we get to hear from some of our guests I spoke to earlier today, starting with Dr. Priscilla Chan, co-founder of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Thank you for stopping by the Forum on Leadership Live desk, Dr. Chan.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
You just finished an interesting conversation with Ann Wicks of the Bush Institute. Give us a recap for our live stream viewers of the themes that may have emerged from your conversation on education.
I had the pleasure of spending some time talking to Ann, and we really talked about what do students need to be successful in the modern changing economy. And that really means having a broader definition of success. What should we be doing to make sure that our students are not only knowledgeable, but prepared to continuously learn? And so that range from what it looks like to really be able to offer personalized learning in the classroom, putting the student and teacher relationship at the center of the classroom relationship, and then really taking a broad look at what you need in addition to academics to be successful, ranging from social emotional development, identity, curiosity, grit, physical health. So a broad range of topics.
Now, you stepped away from your medical practice to launch the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Tell us about that.
Mark and I launched the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative 2 years ago now. We were expecting our first daughter, Max, and we just had this incredibly common human emotion of, oh my gosh, our daughter is coming. We have to do something to prepare. And for that, it was the realization that we want Max and all the children in her generation to live in a world that is incredible and beyond our wildest dreams. And we realized that we needed to do our part to make that happen. And so we launched the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative to be a philanthropy that engineers change at scale. We work in science, education, and justice and opportunity. We realized that we are tiny in comparison to the scope of the problems that we're trying to tackle. So that means that we have to be really incredibly careful about where we think we are best leveraged to actually have impact. And that means for us taking a step back and thinking, where can Mark and I uniquely contribute? And for me, that's been being a school teacher and as a pediatrician, where that experience about being in the front lines and seeing what the real problems are that children and families face every day that prevent them from being able to be successful in the classroom or to stay healthy. And also building the humility and seeing that those great solutions already exist in the field. And what's missing is the opportunity to share that and scale those great solutions to serve all of those in need. And then I've been lucky enough to be paired with Mark, who's built technology that has improved and changed the lives of many and been able to scale those tools to reach many. And so together we've really seen that collaboration across sectors is really key to us being able to be successful, as well as really staying close to the problems and building for the long term.
Well, how can tech best be used in the classroom?
Technology is best when you enable the teacher to be able to do her job best. And for us, the core of it is really the teacher being able to know what each one of her student needs and being able to set each student up for success. And so it's not every child behind a laptop. That is not anyone's idea of great teaching. What we're really talking about is giving students and teachers tools so that instead of facing a classroom of 30 where a teacher is not able to really meet each one of her child's needs, being able to break that classroom down in a way that a teacher can see what each one of her student needs, be able to meet that need and build that incredible one-on-one mentorship that's so important for a child to be inspired, excited about learning, and to be successful.
These are enormously complex issues that you've taken on at CZI. But what do you think the world, if your dreams came true, what would all of this look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when Max is maybe entering high school, let's say?
For me, in being able to build and learn is the key. So in 5 or 10 years from now, we are able to learn what works really well and to do more of that, and to continuously to be adaptive to what the schools, teachers, and children need. And what that means is being able to continue to iterate on what we're doing and understand where we need to go. There's no perfect end state. There is just being able to say, this is what we understand and this is where we need to move forward. And also bringing that broader definition of success. Right now, we know that academics are the table stakes, but we also know that there's so much more that great teachers impart. Really identity, social emotional development, the intellectual curiosity we want each one of our students to have. And we don't know when a teacher, we don't know what makes a great teacher able to do that. But what we hope to do is be able to better understand and make sure that each, how to measure progress for each student.
Last question. Print books or e-readers?
Depends on what you're doing. You have to respond to the environment. So on vacations, an e-reader, so I can bring lots of books.
Right.
But then the nerd in me, there's nothing better than cracking open a fresh book
Right.
and enjoying those pages. So both.
Well, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Chan. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thanks again to Dr. Priscilla Chan for joining us here at the live desk. Stay tuned now for Studio 43, Going Native, Why Conservation Matters in Our Cities and in Our Own Backyards. This is a panel featuring Mrs. Laura Bush and some other interesting experts on conservation. So I hope you enjoy.